Okay guys, this is an episode of Scott Talks Law, and welcome to another episode of Scott Talks Law. So in this episode we're going to talk about the unit of criminal procedure and practice. So we're going to talk about the jurisdiction and structures of courts. So the jurisdiction refers to the powers and the authority that different courts are given to hear and determine particular cases. And structures of courts refers to the arrangements of different courts depending on their size and the jurisdiction that they have. So the most powerful courts are ranked higher above those that are less powerful. So we have different structures of courts, and we are going to look at these courts and the powers that these particular courts have to hear and determine particular cases. So we have magistrate courts, we have High Court, we have the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court. These different grades of course have different jurisdiction in terms of hearing criminal matters that are presented before them. So we are going to start with the magistrate court, and the magistrate court has the jurisdiction to hear particular cases that are not related to crime against humanity, genocide, murder, and treason. So you have those particular cases that can be heard by there are those criminal cases that can be heard by the magistrate court, except those cases involving murder, genocide, treason, and crimes against humanity and war crimes. So jurisdiction of the magistrate is conferred by the CPC Act and the Magistrate Courts Act. So the fourth column of the schedule of the CPC sets out different grades of magistrate courts in which particular offences created by the penal code is to be heard. So it sets out those particular offenses, those different grades of the magistrate court: principal, residential magistrate courts, and the resident magistrate courts, and the offenses that those particular magistrate courts, or those criminal offenses that those particular magistrate courts are to be heard. So it's set out by under the fourth schedule of the CPC Act. So and those offenses are prescribed by the penal code, are described by the penal code. So further, section 7 sets out the limits of pecuniary jurisdiction and terms of imprisonment that may be imposed by different grades of the magistrate court. So section 7 sets out the limits of these grades of magistrate court, the limits that they have. There are other statutes that give criminal jurisdiction to the magistrate court for offenses under this statute. So there are those offenses that are defined by the statute that are just strictly refined for magistrate courts. So these are offenses that are described by statutes like the Children's Act, the Traffic Act, and Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act, and the Contempt of Court Act. So those are the statutes that prescribe or describe the particular criminal offenses that can be heard by these magistrate courts. Not all criminal cases can be heard by the magistrate courts. We have those particular cases or criminal cases that are described by the statute that are to be heard by the magistrate courts. So where a statute creates an offense that does not specify the court that has the jurisdiction to try those offenses, the High Court or subordinate court of first class, that is the one presides over that one which is presided over by the chief magistrate or the senior principal magistrate or the principal magistrate or senior residential magistrate may try it. So you have particular offenses that are not in the statute, have not been defined by the statute. So those particular offenses cannot be heard by the magistrate court. Those offenses can be heard by the subordinate courts of first class, and these are courts are chaired by the chief magistrate, senior principal magistrates, senior residential magistrate, and the residential magistrate. So if not the first class subordinate court, then the High Court can hear those particular criminal offenses related cases. So in the case of Attorney General versus Mohamed Hashi and others, the Court of Appeal, additionally, Magistrate Court have limited jurisdiction to hear and determine claims of denial or violation of infringement of a threat to rights and freedom, or cruel torture, inhumane treatment, and freedom of slavery and servitude. So the magistrate courts have also that jurisdiction to hear and determine crimes against humanity that violate human rights, that threatens human rights, that threatens human freedom, that subject people to cruel torture and inhumane treatment. So that is, it was held from the case of Attorney General versus Mohamed Hashi and another in the Court of Appeal. So let's move to the High Court. We have seen the jurisdiction that the Magistrate Court has in terms of hearing criminal cases. So now we are going to the High Court. So the High Court has both unlimited and appellate jurisdiction in criminal matters. So the High Court can hear criminal matters arising from subordinate magistrate courts relating to criminal matters. It has that jurisdiction to hear appeals from the magistrate, and it also has unlimited original jurisdiction. You can just file a criminal matter in a High Court without going through subordinate courts. It has that unlimited jurisdiction. Jurisdiction is subjected to it. So, however, the High Court merely exercises its own jurisdiction to hear cases that may go before a magistrate court. Instead, the original jurisdiction of the High Court is ascended for the offenses that are triable only in the High Court. So we have these big offenses. We call them felonies, like murder, treason, genocide, crime against humanity, and war crimes. So these big crimes are heard by the High Court, strictly heard by the High Court. However, the court has jurisdiction to hear allegations of human rights and human rights violation arising from criminal cases from subordinate courts. Those that are coming from subordinate courts, the High Court has also the jurisdiction to hear these cases that relate to things to do with human rights violation and infringement of freedom of persons and security of persons. So as an operation of the High Court, it has the jurisdiction to hear appeals from the subordinate court, and it also exercises supervisory jurisdiction over subordinate courts in terms of a judicial review, calling for how this court came up with particular decision. That is judicial review. So it has this supervisory jurisdiction to other subordinate courts. It can call for a judicial review in terms of decisions that were made by the subordinate courts. So it has the jurisdiction to hear cases in the nature of habeas corpus, the nature that demands the production of body. So habeas corpus means the production of body. So it has that and has jurisdiction to hear cases in the nature of habeas corpus, cases that demands the production of body. In the case of R versus Karisa Chengo and two others, the Supreme Court held that the Environment and Land Court and the Employment and Labor Relation Courts cannot hear criminal matters. The court reasoned that although they have the same status as the High Court, according to the Constitution Article 162, they are different and autonomous court. These are different and autonomous courts and have distinct jurisdiction that do not include criminal matters. So subordinate court was held cannot hear issues to do with the Environment and Labor and Land Court and Employment and Labor Court. So you see, these are courts that are not related to they are not supposed to deal with this criminal activity. So they fall under the same rank with the High Court, but they do not have that jurisdiction to listen to cases that relate to crimes. So this is an Environment and Labor Court. It's supposed to deal with the environment and labor issues. This is the Environment and Land Court. So it listening to cases relating to crimes, it has no jurisdiction at all. That is as it was held in the case of Republic versus Karisa Chengo and 2 others. So let's move to the Court of Appeal. We are done with the High Court and the Magistrate Court. So the High Court of Appeal has this jurisdiction to listen to appeals arising from the High Court, criminal appeals or criminal matters. So it also has original jurisdiction of its own. We call it the original jurisdiction in any case of contempt in face of the court. So the courts below are bound by the decisions of the Court of Appeal. All other subordinate courts, the Magistrate Courts and the High Court, are bound by the decision of the Court of Appeal. And it was held in the case of Nisha Sapra versus Attorney General, the High Court at Nairobi, petition number 291 of 2011, and the National Bank Kenya Limited versus Wilson and Dolo Ayap, Court of Appeal, Civil Appeal number 119 of 2002, and the case of Mwai Kibaki versus Daniel Torotich. You can also go and consider those cases and read about them. They concern the jurisdiction of this Court of Appeal. So the last court structure is the Supreme Court. So before you go to the Supreme Court, you need to note that the decisions of the High Court on issues of law necessarily to the decisions they bind lower courts and their subsequent decisions. So the decisions of the High Court in issues of law bind also other subordinate jurisdiction or courts. So the Supreme Court has the jurisdiction to hear and determine appeals arising from any other court or tribunal prescribed by the national legislative law, and to give advisory opinions as required to do so by the national government and any state organ, county government, and matters relating to county government, and all other Supreme Courts. So all courts other than the Supreme Court are bound by the decisions of the Supreme Court. So this is the superior court, the most superior court. So all other courts are bound by the decisions of the Supreme Court. So for the jurisdiction and structure of court, that is what you need to know, that different courts have different jurisdiction in terms of hearing criminal matters, and you have different grades of courts, and that is all you need to know about the jurisdiction and structures of courts. So that is the end of my lecture.